Hey guys, welcome back to What I Saw This Month, featuring me with too much hair. Since we're all still stuck inside for a little bit longer, I'm going to finish up my 2020 movies because I fell super far behind. So for the next couple of months, it's going to be a lot of just rapid succession of movies. So let's get 5 out of the way right now, starting with Antebellum is about an author, Veronica Henley, finding herself trapped in what seems to be some odd civilization in an alternate reality where the Civil War is still going on and slavery is in full swing. So let's talk about Antebellum. When I first saw the trailer, I was really excited for this. It looked very odd. It gave me not to like rope it in necessarily with like the same kind of movie, but like it had like a lot of visual similarities to Get Out, and I liked that movie a lot. And I was thinking maybe it was inspired by it, kind of like a modern, but like still using those kind of like historical elements and stuff. And it made it seem like some weird dimensional stuff, the way the trailer was cut. I'll get the positives out of the way real quick. The direction and the camera work are pretty well done for the most part. I do like the use of lighting. I like the use of like just the camera movement and stuff. And not just behind the camera, but in front of the camera, the actors also do pretty well. Overall, the performances are not too bad. Again, mostly. The first like 30 minutes are pretty good. They really get you sucked in because you want to know the mystery behind all this. Like, what is going on? How did she get here? Why is this happening? And it makes you ask all these questions. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie happens. The second third of the movie goes on way too long. And maybe it goes for a normal amount of time. If you told me it was like 20 minutes, I wouldn't believe you because it felt like 40, 45 minutes. It goes on way too long. And I think the reason behind that, you kind of figure out where everything's going 5 minutes into like the flashback. Once you're like brought back to like before she's taken and it starts playing all that out, you get it. You understand exactly where everything is going. Nothing shocks you. And I think that's the movie's biggest downfall. The trailer makes you curious what's going on. It tries to act as if what you're watching is like some sort of mystery, like what's going to happen, what's happening next, where is this going to go, how deep does this go? And none of it's new or interesting. Like I said, it's not very nuanced at all. The trailer is the most interesting thing about this movie, and that's not good at all. And again, when I was saying like the camera work and the direction visually, it's not too bad, but I don't want to make a J.J. Abrams joke because that feels too easy, but good lord, the lens flares. So many lens flares. So many. I don't know why. It doesn't seem to add anything to the movie. The movie doesn't seem to call for it. It just seems like the director likes lens flares and decided to put them in. You do you, but that doesn't make it like visually captivating or cool. If they're just there, it just becomes weirdly noticeable. It's clearly also making commentary of like what's going on today. And you can't deny that, and that's fine. I have no issue with that. No issue whatsoever. But you also can't take like a serious subject like this, treat it as if it is a really serious subject and like it should be taken more seriously. Like, look, it's happening today. But you also have like the most cartoony villains ever. Like I said, for the most part, the acting's done really well. But there's like a couple of people that are very much like the stereotypical, like, yeehaw, cousin fuckers. And the main lady villain is the second she said one sentence, I was like, oh, she's the bad guy. And you can't have a movie that is clearly trying to like make a serious point, but you have caricatures because it makes the point you're trying to make seem unrealistic, or your commentary like you're just poking fun at the idea. Because I know you're trying to make fun of these people that like you think are stupid and like bad, but it's to the point where you're just like teasing and calling names when trying to have an actual like discussion. It kind of cancels out what you're going for. And again, if you want to have that discussion, you can. But if you want to seem smart about it, you have to let people see it for themselves. Otherwise, it kind of feels like you think the audience is too dumb to understand what you're trying to say. So you have to basically just be like, no. this is right completely. This is what we're trying to get across. Maybe it was meant that way because they wanted wide audience appeal, but that's almost insulting in its own right. So I cannot recommend Antebellum. It is very much, it's labeled as a thriller, but if you go like to IMDb, it's like a mystery drama horror. It's not much of a thriller because the thrills don't really happen until like the last 30 minutes and they're fine. The horror isn't there because it's not scary. Like there's some bits, like little bits that like you're like, oh shit. And then, but in a 90-minute movie, if you have like two or three bits, not sequences, bits, it's not really much of a horror movie. It's not much of a drama because you kind of know where everything's going once you've been introduced to like this new plot detail. And you're like, oh, this is exactly what's going to happen. Basically, what I'm trying to get is don't watch Antebellum. It's not really worth it. Unfortunately, I was looking forward to it, but I have to say it's not worth what it tries to say. And I wish it was. I wish it was better. This is a movie I was hoping for, and it just wasn't. So I can't recommend it. So, moving on to another horror thriller kind of movie. The New Mutants is Fox's technically last outing with the X-Men, a movie that was supposed to come out in 2018, then 2019, and then finally just thrown out in August of 2020. It's about 5 teenagers locked in some creepy facility, and they must find their way out and understand what's behind this weird location they've been locked in. Was it worth the wait? No! No, it was not. Yeah, I'm going to get straight to the point. No, New Mutants was not worth the wait, and that really upsets me, because this is another movie I was really excited about after seeing the trailer. A horror superhero movie. That sounds fun. I wish we had more subgenre like movies involving superheroes and stuff. We've had so many X-Men movies. Let's do something new with them. Fuck it. I'm ready. So let's again start with the positives and we'll work our way forward. The concept itself I love. I love the idea that like you want to do a horror movie with X-Men. That sounds really interesting. And the first trailer came out in 2017, hyping up to come out in April 2018. I saw that and I was like, oh wow, this looks weirdly creepy for like a superhero movie, and maybe it'll be an X-Men movie I don't get tired of watching. So this one might stand on its own. We can do some weird stuff with it, and like maybe if this does good, we can have more, genre like superhero movies. I'm down for that. The cast, I was interested in the cast for the most part. Like I knew who a lot of them were, so I was like, okay, you got some talented people on here. We got Game of Thrones, we have Split Lady, now Queen's Gambit Lady. So we have some people, and then we kept going. Not only is the cast interesting, but the powers that they have, some have really good potential. Like one guy can just set himself on fire. One guy is basically Superball or whatever his name was. He's basically Speedball. He's not, but he is. You have one girl who like is kinda like Scarlet Witch-ish. It kind of seemed like that's where they were going with it. Like reality warping kind of abilities. But like it's not that specific. It's more specific than that. You have a werewolf girl. And you have dimension hopping sword arm girl. That power is kind of weirdly specific. I don't know who that is. I guess I'd have to like look more into it. I should have looked more into it before watching the movie, but I wanted to go in with a blank slate. I wanted to like just go in and enjoy it. Too bad I couldn't enjoy it. I think the biggest weakness of this movie is the fact that it's labeled a horror movie and a superhero movie. And even though I was praising that a second ago, the weakness is it's neither. It's not scary. There's not a lot of really scares either. Like they kind of have like build up to like little scares, but like the climax isn't really a horror like climax. Not really. It's like a superhero climax. But the movie before that wasn't doing superhero like stuff. So it's like this weird blend where it doesn't have the heroics or feel of a superhero movie, but it doesn't have the dread and terror that a horror movie has. It doesn't do either one to its best abilities, so it's like this weird middle of the road nothingness. So you're not going to please the horror crowd because it's not scary enough, and you're really not going to please the superhero crowd because it's not exciting enough. Like what I said with Antebellum, some of the characters are really, really cartoony. Like the characterization is just really wacky and over the top, as if it's like, oh, a comic book. That's not horrible either if they're fun. If you want to have cartoony villains and like heroes and stuff that like they themselves are just caricatures of what they're based on, sure, but it has to be fun to watch or entertaining, and they have to be fun characters. But they're not. They're just very bland people I don't care about. And I don't know what to tell you about that. So, like, the main girl, the focus is, like, what's her power and everything, and there's, like, a twist sort of thing with, like, this bear or whatever. It's silly. It's not like, oh wow, like it's not emotionally like heart tugging and like, oh, everything comes full circle, and it's not like triumphant feeling either. So you have this climax that it's building up to, and it's kind of fucking silly. And the movie doesn't really take itself as a silly movie. It tries to be a horror movie while having the superhero antics, so you don't usually have the vibe of silliness. It feels like the movie was 2 hours and they just kept cutting it down to like 90 minutes because like fuck it, we'll just make it really quick. We'll cut off all the extra fluff. But a lot of the extra fluff was probably more superhero stuff and like more horror stuff. So you have like the bare bones of this movie. Not a great outcome. What can I say about the New Mutants? I do not recommend it. Don't watch it. It's just, you're not going to get a horror movie satisfaction out of it, and you're not going to get a superhero movie satisfaction out of it. It's not going to satisfy whatever you're looking for in this movie, unfortunately. Now time to move on to a different superhero movie. This one coming out just a couple weeks ago. You might have heard of it. A little indie project from DC. Wonder Woman 1984, or WW84, is the newest outing in the DCEU. We follow Diana as she faces off against her famous archenemy, the Cheetah, and a businessman, Max Lord, who seems to be able to grant anyone's wish, but at what cost? I made a video with Ryan on our Hero Vault series where I said the first Wonder Woman I like up until the last part. I give it like, it's okay. It's an okay movie. It's definitely better than what they were putting out at the time. So I was going into WW84 with a little bit of optimism. I was like, it looks fun. The problem was like in the trailer, nothing really grabbed me. Nothing, I was like, it's probably going to be a fun movie, but from the trailer alone, I was like, I'll watch it. So let's talk about the cast real quick. Gal Gadot. She's fine. I think she's a fine Wonder Woman. She definitely looks the part, obviously. She has the characteristics. She has like the demeanor of Wonder Woman, and I like that. It's just at the same time, her performance, it doesn't lend itself to like a lot of emotion sometimes. Pedro Pascal from some weird off whatever this weird side project Disney's doing, he is Max Lord, and he's pretty good, honestly, and that's not a shock at all. He is sympathetic to a point, just like any good villain is. I mean, he steals like this every scene he's in, I think. Chris Pine as Steve Trevor also does well. He does his part fine. He's just as entertaining as he was in the first movie. Sometimes he feels like he's just kind of there, but obviously he's there for a reason. It's part of like the moral and the structure of the story, so it's fine. I like seeing him again. Any reason to have him back, I'm okay with. The action is very fun at points. There's a lot of bits of action. This is like what I was saying with Antebellum, like, and New Mutants. There are bits of action where you're like, wow, that was really, really cool, or that was crazy, like that's some comic book shit. And in this movie, it has moments like that where like the truck flips over, she grabs a bullet with a lasso, like that stuff is really, really fun, and I have no problem with that. The difference is also in that color and action pacing from the first movie. They're different. The first movie has a lot of Snyderisms in it, where it's like the slow-mo into like back to regular motion. There's like a lot of like slowing down in the middle of a move and then capping off back to normal motion. It's a lot of that. But in this movie, it's different. It's very floaty. The CGI also is one of those things where it looks good unless it doesn't. The action and the visuals have this same issue where when it works, it works. It looks good. And then when it kind of doesn't, it's hard to tell if it's on purpose. Is it looking like that because it's trying to have that floaty looking kind of stuff that like the 80s movies would kind of have with their wire work? And if you want to pay homage to that style of filmmaking, sure, but we do live in an age where you are mixing the realism of the movements and stuff. So when you have people jumping off a post like the Amazons in the beginning race, in the opening race, it looks really fucking weird. They look weirdly floaty. It looks like they're not hopping on anything. It's just people on wires jumping back and forth. There's not a lot of weight to these jumps and everything. I don't know if it's a style thing or something they just couldn't pull off. And when you have like that weird middle ground, I kind of go with the fact you probably didn't get to go with what you were going for. The movie also clearly has a heart. It does. It definitely has like a moral it's trying to get across. And it's trying to be like almost like a 2020 palate cleanser. And it's clearly going for that. I think the problem comes in that it's a little too heavy-handed with it. The truth moral is so bashed into your fucking skull. And no one really makes fun of it, so it's not like, oh, they're just goofing, like the concept of it, because it's taken very seriously. I don't have an objection to this truth moral, you know. There's no shortcuts in life, basically. You have to live in reality and deal with it and work with your life through that. If that's what they're going for, fine. But your movie really wants you to fucking know that's what it's about, even though it's very clearly that's what it's about. The opening scene establishes that. Max Lore's whole thing is about that. Like, that's his whole idea. So you don't have to keep giving Wonder Woman all these long-winded speeches that basically are the same thing, just worded slightly differently, multiple times, and that's where Gal Gadot's, I wouldn't say acting range is limited, I would just say she's not putting in, like, the energy to keep me engaged. It's like, I've already heard you say this. I've already heard you say this, but you're saying it to a different person now. It also, honestly, feels way too fucking long. It is 2.5 hours, and I really don't think it needed to be that long. I really, really don't. The plot just kind of keeps going. The movie just kind of keeps going on and on and on. And again, you get where it's going. It doesn't feel like it's padding the runtime. It just feels like the movie was just made to be long. Not even horribly paced. It just feels like it keeps going. I don't really know how to phrase that. It's kind of weird, because you would think like if a movie just keeps going on, it's like, oh, it's a slow movie. It's like, it's not that it's a slow movie. You just kind of feel the 2.5 hours by the end of it. So it's about as long as it feels. And I think that also goes in with the fact that it's not the most engaging plot, because you get it pretty early on. I watched it twice because when I first watched the movie, I was like, I think I liked it. It's a rough one, I think, honestly. It's definitely not their best. Kristen Wiig as Cheetah, or Barbara, whichever one you want to call her. Not a fan. I don't mind Kristen Wiig. I liked her on SNL and everything, but she feels weirdly out of place in this movie. Like, literally her intro to this fucking movie, I immediately was like, oh, she's Electro from Amazing Spider-Man 2. That's her. That's 100% her. But she feels so weirdly out of place in a movie that is kind of fucking silly. That's amazing. How did you do that? Also, with like Max Lord's powers, it seems very magic driven. And I know magic in movies don't adhere to real world logic because magic. I don't know. It's kind of weird because the movie doesn't go in enough about how the wishes work. So when they want to be like, oh, I'm feeling generous, they can do that because it's like, well, why couldn't he do that? It's like, right. So why didn't he do that earlier? And one of the big selling points on like all the posters and all the trailers is like her golden armor that she has. Gonna be honest, it's just there. The reasoning, like why it exists, who it belongs to, why she has it, or whatever. And it really just feels like it's out of left field. Like, it doesn't seem to say it makes her stronger. It's just armor. Cool. I mean, I know why it's there. Toys. Like, every time a new superhero movie comes out, they have to have a new suit, or something about their suit has to be different, so there's a reason to make a new toy about it. And the golden armor in the movie is very clearly only there for toys. She looks like a Power Ranger now. It's whatever. I think the weakest point of this movie, nothing sticks. I remember way more parts of the first Wonder Woman sticking with me, like, oh, that's a nice little scene. They really did that well. This one is like, it's fine. But you'd think a movie that's 2.5 hours long, more would stick. But no, nothing about the movie goes like, dang, That's going to be what I remember about this movie. And I hate that it is. I wish it was better. I want it to be better than the first one because I thought the first one's fine. This is a movie I can honestly say I can't see myself sitting and watching again unless I have to watch it. The first Wonder Woman, even though I don't like the last 30 minutes, I could sit and watch it again because the stuff before that is still engaging enough to where it's like, yeah, I do remember this. I do remember liking this quite a bit. But this one I can't. I would say watch it if you are interested because you might be the audience it's specifically searching for. Go ahead and watch it. If you have HBO Max, go ahead and watch it. It's free. So if you have the time, why not? Might as well get it out of the way. I don't know if it's worth an HBO subscription. So if you know somebody, ask them for like if they can borrow it for 2.5 hours. But myself, I cannot personally see myself watching WW84 in the near future. The Personal History of David Copperfield is an adaptation of the famous Charles Dickens classic following, well, David Copperfield's life. Which I totally knew it was based on a Charles Dickens book I didn't know existed, and I didn't, watch it thinking it was about the magician. So the non-magician based David Copperfield is actually a very fun movie to watch. I will say that the direction is wonderful. I love how everything flows together. The shots are very well done. The momentum of not only the camera work, but like the dialogue and the acting is fantastic. It's like humor that's both dry and very cute humor. And it matches almost really well with the really down dark points of this, not magician's life. The characters not only acted well, but they're very, very, very engaging, inviting, and you like so many of them. They feel like they're people you'd wish you could meet and talk to. They're very fun characters, very loving characters, except the ones who aren't. But even they're such fucking assholes that you're like, God damn it, he needs to get out of here, or he needs to fucking show them. And that's the point of the movie, like, when it comes to that kind of stuff. One thing about the direction I really, really enjoy is the use of perspective changes and flashbacks. They do a lot of in-camera flashbacks. There's a scene where they're talking about where someone went off to, or what happened to another character. And instead of cutting to the footage of recording that, they put David Copperfield in that position. He's there the modern day of when he's telling the story. He's there at his own birth, explaining what happened. He's narrating it while he's standing there when it's happening. He's not really there, but he's interacting with the environment and stuff. There's also scenes where someone's telling him where someone ran off to, or where somebody is. And instead of just cutting to that person, they project it onto the wall behind him. So it's like what he's picturing in his head. And so you can visually see it, but it's still different. It's different enough to where oh, that's kind of neat. That's a good way of telling it instead of just cutting to the shot. But it is not perfect. I didn't mind the pacing for the most part, but I will say the pacing is a little too fast at times, mostly towards the end. Now, I never read the book, but from what I've heard, I think it's one of those things where if you read the book, because the book doesn't really have a limit on how long it has to be, you can just put in as much as you want, as much detail as you want. So by the end of it, everything feels like it came full circle. Nothing was rushed because everything took the time it needed to. But this movie is very eventful constantly because it's about a dude's life and all the crazy people he's ran into and all the events that's happened. So that stuff gets really, really jammed together. So there's some emotional parts I feel would have worked better if the movie was paced slower. It didn't ruin anything, but I know for a fact they were going for something more. And like I said, the pacing gets really noticeable in the ending. Wow, it goes by really quick. It wraps everything up in 15 minutes. And with all the stuff that's happened in his life, there's some things that slowly get built up. So when the ending comes, it's yeah, we paced ourselves there. But there's other bits where it's you definitely just had to end it right there. The main villain, Uriah Heep, so in this movie, he's seen as the main antagonist. Even in the book, he's seen as the main antagonist. He only shows up doing being an asshole like 3 times in the movie, and there's never like long scenes. It's basically just like establishing that he's a dick, reestablishing he's a dick, but he's getting farther ahead, and then like his comeuppance and everything. I feel like the movie wanted you to feel like, oh yeah, he got exactly what he deserved. And yes, he's a fucking asshole, but it doesn't feel super cathartic because you didn't have this like emotional hatred for him that I think the movie wanted you or thought you would have. So I can see why, if you read the book, you're like, wow, it didn't seem like they did him justice. I've never read the book. Obviously, I thought it was based on a fucking magician. But at the end of the day, I personally really like this movie. I do see its flaws in its pacing, and sometimes because of how much there is to tell, you lose some character impacts that you would like to have in there. I wish Uriah was more involved in the story than just being there for one scene, disappearing for a bit, pissing you off in the next time he shows up, and then everything's put away. I wish there was more of him because I feel like you would have gotten across how much we're supposed to hate him. Like, I don't like him, but I don't like hate him because most of his asshole things he does are done off screen and then he's confronted about it. But that's about it. So with that, I still really enjoy it. I would recommend it if you're interested. It's a fun 2-hour movie. If you've read the book, I can't promise you'll like it because maybe the pacing is bad enough to where you're like, well, in the book, this worked way better. It's not as effective as the book was. So if that's your take on it, I understand. I totally get it. I didn't read the book, so I just took it as face value, and I enjoyed what I had. So there. Moving on to our last movie. The Trial of the Chicago 7 is an historical adaptation of the prosecution of 7 protesters at the 1968 DNC, headlined by a ton of well-known actors. So whenever I see a movie like this and I watch it, when I'm done, once the credits start rolling, I always immediately Google how authentic the adaptation is. Because I want to know what parts were right, which parts were wrong, which parts were taken out. Because I want to know how faithful in the right ways that this movie is. So I will say the movie does a pretty good job at adapting the main focus of the trial, I would say. But according to like multiple sources, the movie plays fast and loose with a lot of things that happen. Mainly how a lot of people are portrayed in the movie, except one certain person, which I will get to later. Like I said, it is headlined by some really, really big names. I wasn't expecting to be in this movie. I remember seeing the trailer, and I kind of forgot who was in the movie, and I finally sat down and watched it, and I was really impressed with the people they got. And yeah, obviously you got Eddie Redmayne. Michael Keaton shows up for a little bit. Sacha Baron Cohen's in it. You have like so many good names that like obviously they act the shit out of their role. So many good performances, so much good dialogue, so much good chemistry that they have. It's so well done. And for courtroom drama, I'm a sucker for a good courtroom drama. Most people are. It's just one of those scenarios and settings that like demands your attention and demands you pay attention to everything. And when they're done well, they're done so well. This is one of them, I believe. And with a movie like this heavy, there's still a lot of humor in it. Like a lot of it, and it never feels out of place, and that's really well done as well, and I really respect them for that, because if you can have a very dramatic courtroom movie, but also whenever you want to crack a joke, even if it feels like at the most random of times, and it lands and it doesn't feel like it distracts too much from the situation, in fact helps it, you're doing something really good. You're doing something very well done. It also clearly brings light to obvious problems at the time, especially with a modern lens. And speaking of a modern lens of watching this movie, there are definitely bits of dialogue and things happening in the movie. Feels like that someone's using modern knowledge to write this part. And there's definitely a line in here. If I can find it, I'll play it.
My problem is that for the next 50 years, when people think of progressive politics, they're going to think of you. They're going to think of you and your idiot followers passing out daisies to soldiers and trying to levitate the Pentagon. So they're not going to think of equality or justice. They're not going to think of education or poverty or progress. They're going to think of a bunch of stone-lost, disrespectful, foul-mouthed, lawless losers. And so we'll lose elections.
All because of me.
Yeah.
That was definitely written by a person from today with that idea. Apparently, if you watch this movie, the judge character, one of the most infuriating judges I've ever fucking seen in a movie. And with all the fast and loose, like I said, writing that's done in the movie and like portrayals of actual people, apparently the judge is one of the more faithful versions. He isn't really that much different in real life than he was at the actual trial. And that's baffling because it seems like shit that like only happens in a movie, but no, this actually like a lot of this shit fucking happened. That's where like that weird blurred line comes in, because you would think that part's the movie part and then the other stuff like that's probably closer to what happened. And there's some like crazy things that did actually happen. And then there you find out other things that happen in the movie that surprisingly aren't in the movie. But I would read up on it because it's a very interesting trial, and like a lot of modern issues that are still a thing, especially in 2020, get brought up, and how certain people are treated, and how protesters not only deal with the problems that they are opposing, but how they're treated. It weirdly works because, yeah, 50 years ago, not that long ago when you really think about it. And I think that's clearly what the movie's going for. I highly recommend Trial of the Chicago 7. I think out of all the movies I watched this past month, I recommend this one the most. Please go watch it. It's fantastic. So, with that, and that wraps up what I saw this month. Join me pretty soon for another one of these videos. I'm going to try to have them all pretty quickly out just so we can get to best and worst of 2020 and the me's, which stay tuned for that, and have a good day. Goodbye.